Well, I think everyone's career path is a bit of like a moving, non-linear feast. And I think like most people, sometimes I've fallen into roles that have been completely accidental. So I actually accidentally fell into the tech sector when I was maybe 22. I got a job with Microsoft in Vienna. I was an intern. I was the bottom of the food chain, pretty much on the poverty line, and absolutely had a ball. And that really set me up in Microsoft for about a 14-year career in a number of roles. And why I stayed is because I love technology. I love the impact of technology. I love what it enables people to do. And that's why I stayed in the organisation. I then interrupted that slightly by having children and doing a PhD in entrepreneurship and innovation. I went back to Microsoft, and after having been there for a couple of years in South Australia, I was approached to take on this role in SA government about 6 years ago. And my initial response was, goodness me, that's a big job. And I was a bit hesitant, but I can say that I have thoroughly loved it. Probably with the biggest inspiration for me is the ability to deliver value to the community. I think success, firstly, it means different things to different people. And so I'd say for me, success also means that I get to work with great people. So I've really focused on what it means to build a really strong culture. But I think coming back to what those habits might be, I think one of them that's really helped to ground me is being very clear on what my values are. I think when you can really articulate to yourself and feel in yourself what those values are, it makes all other decisions actually quite straightforward. So, one of my top values is courage and compassion. And courage, I've been courageous many times in my career without even knowing that was my value. But being courageous has helped me find success. And being compassionate to others and to situations and to social justice, those have also helped to form my career and my success. So I think how if you can articulate what your values are, that's really important. I also know I'm an ambivert. I love people, but I also really love time on my own. So I think knowing how we can all refill our own cups is really important. What does self-care look like? How do I put on my own oxygen mask when I'm busy helping others? And carving time out to spend on that is really important, so that as executives, I can bring my very best self to the workplace with lots of energy, positivity, but also the courage to do the right thing, even when sometimes it might be the most difficult path forward, but the right one. So I feel very privileged in our team. We get to work on big, hairy things. They're always the scary ones. Easy things anyone can do. The big things are really hard. One of the really big changes that we recently went through that my team led was around changing our operating model and support model for our state's M365 tenancy. So we have what's called a mega tenancy with over 114,000 public servants, tens of thousands of guests. It's a very, very complex environment. And the support arrangement that we had in place, frankly, was no longer fit for purpose. And this necessitated a lot of change. We had to find a new supplier with a completely new approach that would be future-proofing for the future, and looking at how do we embed automation, remove manual effort, but even more importantly, through the change, which has been a change journey with our agency colleagues, is around how do we give more autonomy back to agencies. Now, here's the thing about change. The original cutover from the previous supplier to the new supplier was bumpy. It was very difficult. Things did not go to plan. However, I believe that one of my roles as a very senior person in government is to also be our Chief Apology Officer. And that is to acknowledge sincerely when things haven't gone as we've expected, but also to ask for people's patience, because it's a very significant change. We know there's an impact on users, and we know that the change will have significant benefits for the state. So really keeping in mind what the value is to our stakeholders, and we've already seen massive improvements in terms of the tickets that have been resolved in a really timely fashion, the automation that is coming through, and the increased autonomy that our agencies have to manage their own environment. So it was a very ambitious change that kind of had a hard date because the contract ended, but we successfully navigated through that, and I'm really proud of the engagement we've had with agencies to demonstrate that we're going to be delivering a lot more value to them. think leadership in government does have a particular style. So I've come from the private sector into the public sector, and I have said to other colleagues there is an element of culture shock there, because the public sector does operate under a different rhythm and mechanism to the private sector. But I think leadership in the public sector is really critical, because we will continue to have funding, we will continue to deliver services. However, we have constraints. We can't remunerate like the private sector can. So how do we keep and how do we attract firstly, and then how do we retain amazing people in our teams to do the really hard work? Because government has to look after every customer. We don't get to choose our customers, and we get some of the most complex customers in the state, the most vulnerable people. So we need really smart minds and smart people focusing on these. So I really think that as leaders, our biggest responsibility is the culture of the teams that we operate in, and really setting the tone from the top. And that goes back to my comment around values. Leaders do set the tone. I make a habit and a practice of doing a walk through my office. I've got about 130 people. I will walk through the office every day, if not every other day. And I will ask people, how was your mum who had the surgery? How was your daughter and her driving lesson? How is that move going for you? And knowing about my people and understanding what makes them tick and supporting them, and being very available that if there is a problem, that can be escalated in a really safe way as quickly as possible, so I can help to resolve. So I think leaders in the public sector, especially because we're dealing with really tricky scenarios, need to build a culture of psychological safety. We need to be courageous in being vulnerable and role modelling to our staff the code of ethics and the public sector values, and really demonstrating that we take culture seriously, that we deal with poor performance and poor behaviour, and let those people know that there are consequences for doing that, and to really recognise people who are really turning up to work day after day without much public recognition, because all the work we do is invisible, but nevertheless knowing that we are making a real difference to the community of South Australia. My greatest aspiration for the government is that we embrace the future, which is very uncertain and has a lot of threats coming towards us, with a sense of courage, with a sense of compassion. I'm highly leveraging my values here, but with a sense of frank and fearless advice to government, so that we can deliver the very best value and know that we are there for the community.